and I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat. They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension and everything and the drama.
How dare! Look at this! How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down with it.
Well, hello and welcome to a live edition here of the Shifts and Pucks. Of course, you can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks. Subscribe wherever you get your audio, as well as on the Area 51 Sports Network. It is the off season, and there is a lot of news going on. This is probably in terms of news, probably the last week is probably the most fire hosey worth of newsworthy events that have happened here. But we're here. We're going to talk about this. We'll talk about the Canucks. We'll talk about the Flames. There's a few other things we can try to get into as well. Jump into the chat, and we say hello to Chris. Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm well. How about you, Kev?
I am good. It is feels like summer outside, blue skies, all of that sort of stuff here in the fine city of Richmond, BC. And and Sean, hello.
Hey, Kev. And just going through our intro, Chris, I miss your shadow mustache.
Your shadow
mustache. I just shaved today.
Throw it back. Come on, Chris.
I won't make any promises, but maybe.
There. And then jumping in, he heard the bat single again. He heard the flame single because, Dan, I got to ask Dan, have you asked from a trade from the Calgary Flames today? Or
I have not, but I have breaking news. Barb, the angry lady behind the bench, said she's not renewing her season ticket. She's out of here as well. Harvey's next.
So Barb is going to go.
Barb's going. Harvey's going.
Harvey's asked for a trade.
Oh, hold on. Breaking news. The hot dog vendor in section 204 not coming back next year either.
Please tell me Scorch is staying.
Well, technically, Scorch is now part of the Calgary Flames organization.
If anything, I thought this would be a perfect time for a promotion if Harvey's gone.
Praise Scorch. I mean, Blasty would get promoted technically because he's the AHL mascot, but Scorch is not Flames canon.
Fair.
I mean,
I prefer Scorch over.
We all know Kevin would be happy.
I would be, but that's,
Kevin hates puppies.
I've always been like anti-Blasty, so that's why I'm pro Scorch.
There you go. Yeah, this angry lady here, she's not coming back.
Oh, I know Barb. You're in Calgary, you know Barb.
Is Barb are you being serious, or is this just a gag?
I have not asked her, but inside sources tell me.
Yeah, so we'll get into the report, the hit that Frank Saravelli had a 960 blew up the waves of Calgary. We'll have a discussion about
the hit that Frank Saravelli had out in the Flames today. Jeez.
Yes, he threw some flames on the Flames today for sure. But
Kev, you were talking about fire hose. He was fire hosing the Flames and extinguishing them.
Yes. Yeah, it's
Is it too early to say that he blew things up like it was a submarine going to the Titanic?
Yeah, and then Elliot even
maybe a little bit
into the fire hose a little later on in the afternoon with news as well. But how do we want to approach this here? Do we want to?
Frank Saravelli just tweeted more news 6 minutes ago, so it keeps coming in for Flames news.
What now?
He says that Mark Savard, former Flame, will now be behind the bench.
Oh, is that okay? Yeah, because Sean noticed that he switched his
Profile picture to the Flaming Sea.
Yeah. So who tweeted that?
Saravelli.
Yeah,
Okay.
it seems that new
So
Flames assistant coach Mark Savard back behind an NHL bench.
Last time Savard was here, he left town because he didn't like the head coach. Let's hope that doesn't happen again.
yeah. Well. Okay, I guess we'll let's start with the Flames. It feels like this is where we're going, and we'll start we'll start with what Saravelli started on 960 this morning. He kind of updated everybody what was already on Lindholm, Hanifin, and Backlund. So he said that Hanifin is definitely asked to leave and said he will not be re-signing a contract. He said that Elias Lindholm, and we need to put this in perspective, because I think the way Twitter responded isn't necessarily what happened here. Elias Lindholm is leaning towards not re-signing with the Flames. Pat Steinberg did say later today that there is a 8-year, $9 million a year offer on the table for Elias Lindholm to consider. And then Michael Backlund came into the news, and he mentioned that he is leaning towards not re-signing for the Flames. But Pat Steinberg also said that he is waiting to see how things go. And Elliot Friedman then later tweeted that the Flames and Tyler Toffoli have basically agreed that they will be seeking out a trade. So it was one of those days for the Flames. And then the assistant coach news came. Elliot Friedman then mentioned the assistant coach news, and Pat Steinberg confirmed at least that it's going to be Cale McLean, Dan Lambert, who was with the Nashville Predators and worked with Ryan Huska in Kamloops. And now it looks like Frank Saravelli has added that Mark Savard will be joining the assistant coach with the Calgary Flames. Mitch Love is heading as an assistant coach with the Washington Capitals. So a ton of news happened today here in Calgary, or out there in Calgary, as two of us are in BC. And I guess I don't know if there was anything in here. I guess to me, there's the only surprise is Dan. I don't know if I learned anything, though. I mean, there's a lot of news. I think that we were kind of like, for Lindholm, we weren't sure what was going on. I kind of knew that Noah Hanifin was kind of decided that he was decided he's not going to sign long term. And in terms of Michael Backlund, I don't know if I'm extremely surprised. I don't know if there's anything here that surprised me.
You know, Backlund's age, I'm not surprised either. I think it's very much the Jerome McGinley situation. It's an old guy who's probably going where he needs to go to win.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with all that too, like I think you're seeing lots of different sort of variations on they're waiting to see what happens to the whole thing with Lindholm. Is if he signs, he wants the team to be competitive. If the Flames are making either way, I think the Flames are going to be very busy between now and July 1st, because regardless of whether or not you've got time until like potentially even as far down the road as the deadline next year in 2024, the Flames need to learn from the Gaudreau situation and not get stuck there. Because if they go into the season and they're at least competitive or competing for a playoff, but maybe it's just a wild card, are they really going to sell?
You can't dump three or 12 forwards if you're competing. Exactly,
right. So if they're making they have to make a decision this summer. And right now, when all the GMs are in a city, that's usually when a lot of the work gets done. They have to take advantage of that.
And not only that, Lindholm and Hanifin have really great contracts. If for a cap that's only going up $1 million, I think you could get a premium just because of what those guys have left.
And especially with how deep this draft is touted to be, if you're not taking advantage of potentially getting first round picks in this 2023 draft, and I think it's a wasted opportunity for the Flames at this point, if that's the way they go. If not, if Lindholm does sign and they do try and compete, then they still have to make some big moves, because I think you have to make a statement to show that and back up the words that you got Lindholm to sign long-term on.
Yeah, to add to Kevin's initial point, I think this more just confirmed speculation as opposed to was shocking breaking news.
Yeah, all these guys were wishy-washy at the end of the year press conferences. We knew all these guys were maybe wanting to get out of here.
I think the biggest surprise for me is Toffoli.
Yeah.
Fair. Yeah, I think especially for more so Flames fans, not speaking for myself, I think it was more they were hoping that with Sutter being gone that maybe that might change the opinion of some of these guys. But according to Frank, not the case.
You know what, Chris? And I think we all thought that. But if you look at the Calgary Flames organization, I mean, this has been a middling organization since 2004, let's call it, right? The last time that they did anything. This is an organization that can't even get out of the second round. Like, if I'm looking at signing long-term, as much as it pains me to say it as a Flames fan, as a player, why do I want to sign here long-term?
I would make the argument of, isn't Minnesota the exact same situation, though?
Yeah, but in Minnesota, though, you've got different tax scenario. You're not doing as well. I mean, we don't know that these guys want to go to Minnesota either, though, right? Minnesota's not seeing a mass exodus, but I'm not seeing Minnesota being a hot destination for NHL players.
Yeah, fair.
I think it's just that Minnesota has a lot more of a younger core. You've got Kaprizov, you've got Boldy, that are coming up through the ranks, and I feel like if that's the case, I think it makes more sense that they're a team that's on the rise as opposed to a team that is floundering.
Well, and Sean, I think that's a big thing here is Minnesota's gone through a rebuild, if you will. Calgary's never really done that. I mean, we could argue the Young Guns era, but they even screwed that up. Like, this is a team that's been in perpetual win now mode, never won, and as such, they're lacking a lot of those young assets.
And that's why
they did it better than the Canucks tried to do it.
Yeah.
Maybe not by much, but I would say they at least got a little bit more consistent as far as like playoff presence and even expectations of winning the West and all that.
I think it depends what era we look at too, though. I mean, for a while there, the Canucks went all in, brought in even guys like Messier to try and do that.
Oh, that was a hot mess of an era.
That's back when they had the grade 8 jerseys, boys.
Yeah, with the Flames, I just look at this and if you can convince that Lindholm to stay, then you have to build around him. If you can't, then it's absolutely time to rebuild.
To burn it all down.
Yeah, because you don't. If you're trading Lindholm, you're not. I do not think you're getting a number one center back in a trade with Lindholm or Hanifin.
No,
because those are your two those are the two big key assets.
You could get a prospect. You could get a prospect center that could potentially be
not for this year.
Potentially, but that's why you rebuild around that. Yeah. If you do that, it's a rebuild because you're actually creating a new core.
Yeah, and I think if you get that guy, you've got Peltier, you've got Coronado, you've got Zari. Now you've got
Dustin Wolf coming up.
Yeah. The only thing they don't have is prospect defensemen. I mean, Poirier is not your guy. I think if you're going to do this, they've got to trade for some D prospects.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's like you look at where the Flames are at now, and I've talked about this since essentially the Huberdeau trade, the Tkachuk trade, is that you look at this team and they don't necessarily have that true bona fide number one defenseman. And you look at most of the top teams, they have that.
I've sat here many a night with you and we've discussed this, Sean.
Exactly. So if you're going to do it, you got to do it right, and you got to start build. Maybe Poirier could be that. He's still young. He still has the but he's also only 20. And you're looking at when teams win cups, you're looking at the average core sort of age range, it's late 20s. So you're looking at 6, 7, 8 years down the road. It's time to rebuild for the Flames.
And Kevin and Chris might not be able to answer this as much, not being in Calgary, but Sean, you probably can. I think that if there's ever been an appetite for a rebuild with Flames fans where they could stomach it, it'd be now. If you got guys that want out, it's the perfect time to say, hey, great, these guys want out.
Here's the door.
Again. Yeah,
Well,
here's the door,
I
but
think
let's not let them walk for nothing. You want out? Great. Let's go out and find a bunch of young guys who want to be here and build something new. And I think you might finally be able to sell this to Flames fans. New coach, new GM, new core, new philosophy. Oh, and by the way, Jerome McGinley's here too. And, I think that we might be able to sell this to Flames fans now more than we ever have been before.
Yeah, selling a rebuild is easy right at the beginning. It's when you get 2-3 years into it that it gets very, very tough. Just look at Vancouver. As much as
fans get antsy.
As much as the Canucks fans talk about how the Canucks didn't rebuild properly, they rebuilt pretty averagely compared to like a lot of the league. They just didn't go all in on essentially tearing it all the way down to the studs.
And the Flames wouldn't be able to either.
Works.
Yeah, they didn't do a Chicago.
You're not going to be able to move the Huberdeau deal. You're not going to be able to move the Kadri deal. Like the Flames can't rip it down to the studs either.
No. So it's but you still have the Flames have an opportunity here where they've got Backlund who's one year left on a was he
5.2.
5.2. Lindholm's on an absolute steal of a deal for what he can be for a team. Hanifin's on a really good deal for a top 4 defenseman. Toffoli is someone who can a competitive team's going to want in their middle 6. They've got opportunity here to just add a shitload of assets, draft picks, prospects to start building up and potentially getting
and how often as a franchise do you have that ability to make such a pivot? How often do you get this many assets in 1 year that you can sell if you want to?
Like I think the linchpin here is Lindholm, because if they can convince Lindholm to sign, they will try and stay competitive at least for the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, I think the linchpin is Lindholm, but I also think that part of the linchpin is also you've got the best draft class in a decade. If you're going to do this, do it now.
Exactly, right? And I know, Kev, you responded to you were listening to Pat Steinberg earlier today, and he talked about how you need to be patient. I agree, you need to be patient, but you also have to take advantage of this draft.
And a rebuild requires patience.
Yes.
I don't think. I mean, I guess I guess what I'm saying is. If there is a better deal on the table after July 1st, seems to be a lot of this best draft in a decade thing is an interesting thing that we've heard, Dan, because it seems to be a lot of teams that are wanting to move up and down. And from what I've been reading, I've done a lot of reading and listening here. It looks like the top 15 are in a certain level here. After that, it seems to be at a different level after that. And then in terms of defensemen, this draft isn't very strong. So I
don't know if the draft isn't strong or the first 40 aren't strong.
Well, it's so early, and like a lot of what people talk about with drafts is the top end, whether it's the top 5, top 10, top 15. After that, it can be a little bit of a crapshoot. Yeah.
And you don't have to go draft that defenseman either. You can always make a trade for. In some ways, I think it's better to get the devil you know than the devil you don't. Make a trade for a guy who's already been drafted, who you have a book on.
Yeah.
Although trying to trade for trying to trade for a quality defenseman has been quite the task in the past decade or so.
It has, and I'm not saying trade for a roster defenseman, but I think you could pry away a good young defenseman from a team if you're offering them Lindholm as part of that package. Like I think you could get that guy to rebuild with you.
Yeah, I think that there's a number of ways to go on this, and I think like you can't I'm not saying. It doesn't just wait until September. Not necessarily if Lindholm doesn't want to be here, it's not a good thing to have him at camp. I agree. And it's with Hanifin and even with Backlund and Toffoli. I think you got to kind of make those moves sooner, but I also think that you need to be smart here. Cause I guess one of the questions that will come up is did Tree live in panic a little bit with the Huberdeau Uyghur for Tkachuk trade? I mean, I still don't think that it's not a bad trade. It just looks bad at this point in time. Considering
I think at the time he did the best he could do.
Yeah,
he did the best he could do with the mandate he had from ownership, because I'm pretty when I look at that deal, you totally could have started this rebuild a season before by going after a more futures laden deal. But I don't think that was in the cards for the Flames at that point, because I think they wanted to continue to be competitive, and which is why they went after the Weegar-Huberdeau deal. And in terms of a win now, it didn't work out, but in terms of a win now package, I don't think he could have done any better.
No, I agree.
He made the best lemonade he could with rotten lemons.
Well, I still think Mackenzie Weegar is a really good defenseman. I think Jonathan Huberdeau, if Lindholm comes back, I think Lindholm and Huberdeau is still a really good combination that you can work around.
And even in a rebuild, you need veterans on the team. This is what I've been critical of Edmonton for years, is what I call the blind leading the blind. You can't have a bunch of 20-year-olds teaching each other how to play the NHL game. You need Kadri, you need Lindholm, you need, Backlund or somebody. You need, Weegar on the back end to take these guys and say, here's how we do it, boys. Let's go out there and play this game. So, I think even now, even if it looks bad, I guess, I think those pieces are going to be very valuable as we rebuild. A Huberdeau, a Weegar, I think, you're going to need those if they go that way.
And considering the chemistry that Huberdeau did not have under Sutter, who knows, maybe with Huska leading the charge, he could have a major bounce back season.
Well, that's the thing, but only if he's willing to be there. And I think the Flames need to set a deadline for Lindholm here and say, if you aren't willing to sign by Tuesday,
I wouldn't be surprised if that deadline is in place, Sean, and it's probably draft day.
Well, the round one is Wednesday, which is why I said Tuesday. It allows them to sort of just go immediately switch over. You're probably still calling teams and saying, if he's not willing to sign with us, what are you willing to? But it also allows them to, once you have that, you can switch it and you're not panicking on the Wednesday.
Okay, here's a couple of things that I just want to talk a little bit before I want to touch on Lindholm here in a second here, but I want to talk about a little bit of just push back on the rebuild a little bit, because right now this is what I'm seeing. And I think a lot of people at this point to what happened with the New York Rangers and I'm using air quotes at those on the podcast, rebuild, because it was not a rebuild. Everyone wanted to go to New York, and why the hell not? Calgary is going to be very much different. This has the potential, if this is not done right, to be the early 2010 Oilers. Dan, I'm glad you mentioned that, because this has the potential to be an unmitigated 10 to 20 year disaster that the Flames cannot afford to get in. So what I think that people need to be aware of is you're going to either have to be patient if you want this rebuild, and understand that there's going to be some pitfalls. I mean, we look at Ottawa. Ottawa has been through this rebuild. Pierre Dorian thought a couple of years ago that they were on the trajectory up. They weren't on the way up, and they still haven't been back in the playoffs yet. It takes, the Buffalo Sabres have been in a perpetual rebuild since what?
Since Tucci Teramoto was drafted.
What's that?
Since Teramoto got drafted.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes,
Right?
that's a great call.
From the Tokyo Katanas.
So I just think that I think that people have to understand that this rebuilding, and you're going to get to the cup in 5 years. This is it's not going to be an easy path.
No.
If they do it, I think it's 10 years before the Flames are really competitive.
Yes, that's that. As I said, teams that win the cup, their cores are in the in their late 20s. If you go back through all the way back to the beginning of the salary cap era, we're talking about that we're now almost 20 seasons since, and you're probably looking, I think it's really just the Blackhawks and the Penguins that really did it when their core was significantly younger than that.
Yeah.
And, every other team, I think, Sean, on that too, has gone through waves. Like even Chicago now is going through the wave. I think Pittsburgh's about to go through that wave, right? They've got older guys. Calgary hasn't gone through that wave. Calgary's been a perpetually middling team since, the early 2000s. And at some point, you've got to go through that cycle. And even the good teams, you see them good for a couple of years and they blow it up. I think we're starting to see that with Washington, and they're going to have to start that cycle again. So, I think you've got to realize the NHL is cyclical, and it's, at some point, if the Flames think they've got a couple more years, great, but have a plan for when that's going to start then, because you have to rebuild at some point.
They got to fill that prospect cupboard in some way, shape, or form.
I'll be a little bit of the devil's advocate on this. If all these guys thought they wanted to come back, I wouldn't say rebuild. I think they've got the roster to make a run. If you could get all these guys back at reasonable costs, and I was ownership, I'd say let's run for it again, because we put a lot of effort into this. The only reason I think now is the time for the rebuild is because guys want out. You got to seize the opportunity.
Yes. If they were, I also think that, if all these guys were wanting back, they would be re-signing them to at least Lindholm to long-term deal.
And you'd be going out trying to find some other guys in free agency, trying to round out that roster.
Although with the mass departures that are going on in both Calgary and Winnipeg, is anyone else getting like flashbacks of like the 90s when like Canadian teams were like being threatened with leaving and whatnot?
Well, not really, because I think it's just part of it is cyclical here. Where both the Flames and the Jets are kind of at the end of their cores here. I think honestly, the Flames core. The end of the Flames core ended last season when you had
Johnny and
Chuck and Gaudreau leave, and so they're trying to turn over this new core, but it just didn't work, and now you've got sort of all these sort of, I would say, not like super like you've got like the core, and then you've got like the peripheral players. And they all want out now, and it's time. I think it really is time to just move on from this, and whether it's choose your whatever RE word. But I think when you look at that, when you're trying to build a new core, up from now, it's rebuild.
Well, Chris, I know what you're saying, but if we can't even get Bettman to move the Coyotes, I'm not worried about the Canadian teams moving anywhere.
Yeah, but Bettman is like concerningly obsessed with keeping the Coyotes in Arizona.
But once we get the Salt Lake Coyotes, then we can worry about Winnipeg moving.
Yeah. Fair. And for what it's worth, that was like 75% joke with like a kernel of truth.
The problem with
the province is going to get their new rink if the Flames leave.
Yeah. Well, that's the other political part. But here's the problem with the Lindholm situation from where I see it. Like, first of all, let me just can I have a moment here to talk a little bit about Elias Lindholm, because there is a certain tweeter in Flames land that is claiming that Elias Lindholm is overrated. That is just complete, pardon my French, it's complete fucking nonsense. Elias Lindholm will win a Stanley Cup. He is that type of player. He is an elite number one center. He is the type of player that you win cups with. He is, I'm sorry, he has done all the work. I'm a huge Elias Lindholm fan, and I just think it's like some of the comments about Elias Lindholm have been ridiculous. Tyler Toffoli, career year playing with Elias Lindholm. Matthew Tkachuk, his first 100-point season, played with Elias Lindholm. Johnny Gaudreau, 100-point season. Who did he do it with? Elias Lindholm. He didn't do much in Columbus last year. Dylan Dubé, best season, played with Elias Lindholm. Adam Ruzicka, his best offensive moment with Elias Lindholm. So stop with the nonsense. Elias Lindholm is an elite center in the National Hockey League. Absolutely.
Kevin, but I think a lot of people maybe think that because he's not your sniper. He's not your fan favorite guy. I think Lindholm does a lot of good things, but he's more of a two-way guy and a setup guy, and those guys often don't get the love from the casual fan.
I was going to kind of push back to a certain degree and be like, I totally get where you're coming from, Kevin. You are right to be like upset in your rebuttal of that. But I will say, how many cups did Iginla have?
Well, Chris, now he's coming back, and he'll get one with the Flames as a special assistant.
But Ginlin was a winger, Lindholm was a center, and Elias. Listen, I will tell you this: there's a better chance of you winning a cup with a Selke Trophy centerman than it is with a Hart Trophy centerman. I think
promise you stats on that.
Because I'm going to tell you, I'll make a bold prediction. I'm going to tell you something. Jack Eichel will be in the Selke Trophy conversation next year.
Elias is happy with what you're saying about him.
Yes. Anyway, here's the two problems that I do see here with the Lindholm trade. Just to say that here's the challenge. The first challenge is, yes, his contract is great, but this cap, we still don't know where it is going. And I do wonder, because if you're
going up it's going up $1 million this season, and then it'll go up significantly after. Because I think
Batman said $1 million this year. It's expected to be at $88 million in 2024 and $92 million in 2025.
Yeah, because they just missed getting rid of that
$70 million to pay off in the escrow.
The escrow.
Well, the thing is everyone, if you're going to acquire Elias Lindholm, you can't have this as a rental. You got to make sure that he's signing a long-term deal that he wants.
Yeah, but right? I think every team knows that it looks like is going to try and find a way to understand where the cap is and all that. And
what are you kicking him out for?
Stop kicking him out.
And
Kevin, stop doing it.
And if the Flames do trade Lindholm, and like we said, they're going into a whatever reword you want, like Sean said, I bet they'd be willing to swallow some cash if they needed to.
Yeah. Here's the second one. And Devin, I'm so glad. Welcome, by the way. Devin has jumped into the chat. Here's the second challenge.
Did Sean talk about Brad Living? Is that why I'm here?
No, he might.
I want to say the best part about Brad Treliving becoming the Leafs GM is I can still use the Brad Treliving bat call for Dev.
Well, we're about to talk about Hanifin, and maybe Tree wants Hanifin, so we can go that way.
No, here's what I want to ask, and how does the Austin Matthews situation play into this? And the reason I ask is if we have that situation that's coming up as well, and as much as I love Elias Lindholm, if Austin Matthews becomes available, the teams that will be interested in a center will probably be going to Brad and asking about Austin Matthews first.
They will first, but at that point, I think the Lindholm deal just gets kicked down the road. It's like we see on trade deadline day. You get the big fish out of the way, and all the guys that lost out come in and inquire about Lindholm. It doesn't get done the draft then. Maybe it gets done July 6th. But I think that there's room enough in this town for two partners. You can trade both of them in the same offseason.
Lindholm will be a bride at some point, not a bridesmaid.
That's right. And the teams that are going to be in on Matthews are, I think, a very different price range than Lindholm as well.
I feel like I jumped in at a very opportune time to talk that Austin Matthews is not going anywhere.
No. Okay. I think I'm pretty confident Austin Matthews is going to stay in Toronto.
Can you find a sucker to take Tavares?
There's no way that's happening either. God, people are having a hard time with wrapping their heads around re-signing O'Reilly, let alone having just Tavares on it. Okay, it's been a bit. I mean, not so much turmoil as it is here in Calgary, but Toronto is, Toronto. So,
just a brief, quick aside though, did you guys hear Elliot drop the stirring the pot moment addition into the 32 Thoughts pod about the Canucks apparently interested in O'Reilly?
I think it wasn't that they're interested. He just thought that maybe that's their target. There's nothing there other than Elliot just theorizing.
Yeah, it's obviously pure speculation, not an insider report.
If you want to theorize about these teams, I think that a deal that could make sense if both teams want to make a run would be Hanifin for Nylander. And obviously there'd have to be some other pieces going both ways. But Toronto needs defense. Calgary needs a forward. Brad's intimately familiar with him.
Yep. I could definitely see that being those two pieces being the forefront of that deal.
And because it's a living deal, it would have a draft pick with all sorts of conditions. If Brad wears a pink tie to the draft, it's a third rounder. If it's a red tie, it's a fourth rounder. If the draft is on a Tuesday and it's overcast, it's a fifth rounder.
Well, it's on a fifth rounder because it's on a Wednesday.
This year, but what if it's a 2024 pick?
Devin,
why is it on a Wednesday this year? Because hasn't it normally been on like a Friday?
Normally it is Friday. I think
it's Friday night, Saturday.
I think Elliot and Jeff made a joke that there was too many bachelorette parties going on in Nashville that they had to get midweek.
and Sean, usually it's about a week before. It'd be like this weekend because usually it's about a week before the free agent deadline, not 2 days.
Yeah.
But to go back to the Treliving thing, like I would not be surprised if Calgary-Toronto deals are going to happen just as much as like Vancouver-Pittsburgh, as far as management in that respect, became like fast friends. Calgary and Toronto are going to be fast friends as far as transactions.
So
I would not be
Toronto
surprised.
and Pittsburgh will never make a deal again.
Well, Chris, I'll just sort of counter that because we haven't seen a Pittsburgh-Vancouver trade.
No, I was talking more management in the Vancouver-Pittsburgh connection. But yeah.
I mean, I guess like so I guess Devin, where are you at? How are you feeling about all of this with Lindholm and?
You know what? On a very quiet Thursday that I thought it was going to be, it is a massive shitstorm within Calgary, and I don't know what you guys have talked about before, but the number one hinge point in all of this is Lindholm. As far as the direction of the Flames go, as far as I'm concerned, Hanifin, it feels like that was the topic of conversation even before the potential of Backlund and Lindholm going and Toffoli potentially going. It's very interesting to be a Flames fan right now because you're wondering what the direction of the franchise is going, and if I've had a long time to really think about it, and the more that I think about it, I think it's time to take a step back and sell these players for the future. As far as the trajectory of the potential building that isn't official yet, but we're hoping it's going to be official soon. And this draft is potentially going to be another 2003 draft, and that's what it's projected to be. So if we're going to get maybe 3 first rounders potentially for we already have our first rounder, but trading Hanifin away for a first rounder, trading Lindholm for a first rounder, I think if I am Craig Conroy, I got to take a step back and be okay. Well, are my 3 top guys that aren't going to be here next year, or 4 top guys that aren't going to be here potentially next year, don't want to sign? Why not look at that potential opportunity to capitalize on this draft capital in this draft class?
Apparently Huska's good at PowerPoints. Maybe you can put one together for Conroy to sell that to the ownership.
It's true. And I mean, on the other end, you lose Mitch Love to Washington as well. It's been quite a day for the Calgary Flames and the organization to potentially sell.
Chris, going back to your Scorch reference, since you're in Vancouver, you're just going to sit and watch Calgary burn and.
And I just want to use all the Flames puns of like burn it down, fire sale.
You're just going to dance while Calgary burns down.
Yep.
Chris, I would love to see that fucking video of you dancing like that. For the love of God.
That would be amazing.
Do you remember when we were kids and they had the Mario show and there's that song at the end, do the Mario, and they touch and do the dance? Chris could do the Scorch.
Oh God!
Jeff, did you see the latest news for in the Flames fire hose of news for Thursday?
Is there more?
Yeah,
Mark Savard is apparently joining the Flames as an assistant coach.
Great. I'd say that's a positive of what's happening here as far as like direction and the way that Craig Conroy wants to go is forward. instead of maybe taking a retool kind of approach to it, if you will.
So, okay, let's kind of we kind of had this conversation before, but I'm going to throw a couple. Can I throw a couple of other teams in this conversation for Elias Lindholm that I was thinking a little bit about?
As far as like trade destinations?
Yeah.
Sure.
You talked about the New York Rangers, you talked about defensemen. The New York Rangers do have a good depth of prospect defensemen, and there was one that Brad Treliving decided to pass up on for Connor Zary that I do think might not be too bad of a situation here in Braden Schneider. And I do think the Rangers do need help up the middle. Like when you look at that Metropolitan Division and you look where Sebastian Aho is and Jack Hughes is, I don't know where Mika Zibanejad fits, but they definitely need some help up the middle if they're going to compete. I think the Rangers should be one of the teams that are pushing really hard at Elias Lindholm. And they do have the
I guess the question there is, do the Rangers think that they are going to compete next year where they would be willing to make that kind of deal?
Well, they hired Peter Laviolette. They've got a primetime goalie in Igor Shesterkin, and they got an owner that is not interested, hates the word rebuild worse than the Flames owner. So I think, yes.
I don't know if that's possible.
Well, look at what the moves that they've made before the trade deadline and getting Patrick Kane and Panarin. Tarasenko, sorry. Panarin's already out there. They are in a win now mode, and they have Capo Caco, who is remains to be seen to be a quality NHLer as far as where he was drafted. Same with Lafreniere. And Braden Schneider, I think he would be a good trade chip for a team looking in a very similar circumstances the Calgary Flames is okay, what are we doing here? And they have a quality player basically ready to potentially move. And that you look at also Vincent Trocheck. Or they signed that deal with Vincent Trocheck as well. I think it's a win now mode for the Rangers. So I don't think Kev's potential trade is out of the realm.
I like the Rangers, and if the Flames decide not to go with the defenseman and go with a forward, I think there's a possibility they could potentially pry Lafreniere out of there for Lindholm if they wanted to get a roster player.
Well, what would you rather have, Lindholm Lafreniere or Schneider?
Schneider.
I think it's hard to answer in a bubble because I think multiple guys are going to move. And, if you could say did the Lindholm for Lafreniere and you could get the defenseman for another one of your pieces, I think that's a hard thing to answer with 4 or 5 pieces potentially able to move.
Well,
just to throw a little bit of cold water on that there, Kev, we're talking, you're like, where does Mika Zibanejad fit? You're talking about the guy who scored 39 goals and 91 points in 82 games last season?
Yeah, but do they have
the guy who scored 81 points
Carolina
the season before and 41 goals in the 1920 season? Like he's a true number one center in this league as well. And I think
I will push back is, are they as competitive? Like, do you match up with New Jersey with Jack Hughes and Nico Hischier right now?
I think the question is where does Vincent Trocheck fit?
He had an off year, and he will have, or he should have a bounce back season. But he still is like a 1-2 within this league. But I think what Kev was getting at was that, it's more of a tiered system within the Metropolitan, because you have a Crosby, Malkin as well within that the Metropolitan as well. So you got to look down the middle, and if the Rangers want to take the next step, that Lindholm would be a fantastic fit within that, especially with Cheeto, being a third line center and kind of sheltering him within having a Lindholm as your number 2.
My 2 cents on this trade proposal
could be a good place for him.
My 2 cents on the trade proposal is, as a Schneider and a Canucks fan, I'm not okay with a Schneider being on the Flames.
Fine, whatever.
Just because of the name.
Yep.
That's a good
Is it funny? Sure, but I'm not a Flames fan, so that's my 2 cents.
If you want to look
Corey?
out east, I think that the Islanders could be a landing spot for Lindholm as well.
Yeah, that's possible. Mike Gould suggested Detroit.
They have a shit ton of cap space, and they can
They
offer
do.
him the goddamn world for sure. And they are in the up and up. So hey, the Iser plan could still be in place for sure.
They
with
could give him Tavares money instead of Horvat money.
Yeah.
You mean DiPietro money?
Oh
The
yeah,
Islanders are a team I think to watch for sure, because I think they might want to shake things up after having a very subpar season, also in that Metropolitan Division. But Detroit, I just don't know if they've got. They'll have to throw a whack ton of picks to get that done, because I don't know if they've got, unless they're willing to give up someone like a Simon Edmondson.
But what about Philip Hronek? Oh wait. Yeah,
He's in Vancouver.
Shit.
and they signed
Beat you to it.
And they did sign Larkin, so it's not like, I think a Larkin Lindholm 1-2 done will be fantastic. It'd be interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if Yzerman gets a little aggressive this offseason to try and jumpstart this the rebuild that's going on in Detroit.
We had somebody tweet to our podcast today, and I'll put this out to you guys. Does Columbus think that they're a contender? If so, do they try and reunite Lindholm and Gaudreau?
If I was the Flames, that would be the place that I go, because there are two potential elite centers in that organization with Kent Johnson, Cole Sillinger, that I think would be good ads. They do have some prospect defensemen that it would be interesting as well. They're not giving up the third pick. Like, that is just complete.
Even if you took a 2024 from them, say, hey, bet on yourselves. We'll take your 2024 with some conditions.
The thing with Columbus is, I know Gaudreau's there. I know Goodbranson's there. Is Lindholm willing to, like, I'm sure Lindholm is sort of in a similar situation as Backlund in terms of wanting to be part of a contender. Is Lindholm willing to sign a contract right away? Because I think if the Flames are going to capitalize on this, especially Lindholm, I think they need to be able to, the acquiring team needs to be able to sign him to a long-term deal.
And I don't think that you would see the Blue Jackets even try to pull that off if they couldn't convince Lindholm that they were a long-term, place to go.
Jarmo Kekalainen, he's been the general manager for, I want to say, 7-8 years now. He's been there for a long time, and it sounds like the ownership was not happy with the way that things went last year. So if Jarmo is going to be pulling the trigger on a big deal, it would make sense that it would be Lindholm. But yeah, as of right now, it doesn't sound like the third overall pick would be involved with that. But if you put a Noah Hanifin and a Lindholm in that trade, then you better fucking believe that would be the case. Jarmo swings for the fences too. So
and I don't think that you'd get the third overall. I think it would end up being a 2024 pick if you're making that deal.
For both of them,
2024 pick or you're looking at a Kent Johnson or a Cole Sillinger.
I don't think you trade both of them there. I don't think that they would have the assets to swing for both.
Oh no, I'm saying like you're gonna get you'll get a first, you'll get one of those guys, or you're looking at also like probably, in terms of prospects that they've got, Corson Kuhlmans, Denton Matechek, I think are on the blue line.
That's right, because their Pullman's more desirable than our Pullman.
Available because they're not trading David Jiricek. No. I think the third is off. I think our third is off the board, as well as Jiricek. Everything else, I think, would be available. But I think it's all dependent on whether or not Lindholm's willing to sign long term there.
And I don't think Hanifin goes. I think there's better destinations for Hanifin.
Well, the other question with Lindholm as well is he willing to put up, after a year of Sutter, is he willing to put up with Babcock?
That's the other issue, yeah.
And the interesting thing here, too, is of all the guys we're talking about, Lindholm's the only one that has no movement on there. So the Flames have a lot more ability to move him than they do Toffoli or Backlund or even Hanifin.
Yeah,
that being said, though, Dan, I think going back to where if they want to get the most for him, It's all about finding a destination he wants to sign.
Oh, I don't disagree, but I
Yeah.
think that you're not bound by, say, a 10-team list or a veto. I think you've got a lot more flexibility.
You're not bound to it, but yeah, in terms of getting the best return, you basically have to work with him.
I got one more team.
Detroit would be. I think, would be a good spot for Hanifin. Just FYI.
Okay, we'll get to Hanifin in a second, but I have one more place for Lindholm that I think this team is flying way, way, way under the radar. But I just want to point out they got a new GM coming in on July 1st. They got a new owner coming in there as well. They just acquired a ton of draft picks for Tanner Jeannot. I wonder if the Nashville Predators inquire about Elias Lindholm. They do have the pieces to do it. They just acquired pretty much an entire draft from Tampa Bay. So they've got a draft pick. They've got extra picks in every round for the next few years.
But then sorry, Kev, keep going.
They also, Lindholm would be a great fit with Philip Forsberg, who you paid a lot of money for. You've got an elite defenseman in Roman Josi. You've got an elite goalie in UC Saros. Lindholm could get you a bounce back and get you into the playoffs if you're Nashville. I wonder if they sneak into this conversation a little bit.
I don't see it. It's one of those ones where Saros has been on the market for a while. He's 28 years old. Roman Josi, I believe, is just over 30. It's one of those ones where you have to really, you got to be wanting to win now. And I don't think that they really have the depth within that organization to make it work. And so if I'm, what's his name? New GM for Trotz, Barry Trotz. If I'm Trotz, I'm looking at a long-term look on this and sell Forsberg, sell potentially Josi and Saros to make your team better, especially at this draft when, I mean, this draft and next draft is supposed to be pretty deep. So I think that they're very similar as the Calgary Flames right now.
Do you guys think that we could see Lindholm go back to Carolina?
Potentially. Yep. With Rob Brindamore there, how could you say no? Honestly.
Yeah.
You run through fucking 12 walls for that man.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's a team that he came from. He seemed familiar there, so I could see him go back. The dark horse to me, if you want to throw kind of maybe fringe teams, I don't know what the Penguins think they are. I mean, you've got Crosby at 35, Malkin at 36. I don't know if they know that they're a rebuilding team or if they think they can still make a run for it. But if they think they can make a run for it, I could see them try to bring Lindholm on.
Not only that, but Weeders is going to try and establish himself out there too.
I would say Pittsburgh, we were looking more for Hanifin than a Lindholm when you've got Crosby, Malkin down the middle.
Yeah, I guess it would just be if you want that younger guy to sort of, be there long-term for when those guys go away.
Well, I mean, Crosby and Malkin have not been the epitome of health within the past few years either. So
that's why I think that having that younger guy to anchor that could be good.
Well, in what else? Jeff Carter's going to be your third line center, right? And you can push Malkin down the lineup or Crosby down the lineup. You can really make it. Look at what they were doing when they won the cup, right? They did the BLK line, BLK,
HBK line,
HBK. You know what? I'm the worst for this shit, so apologies.
Mark Stone, you don't know.
Oh, it's a Stone fucking.
All we know is that they were all just sexy boys.
Exactly.
Brady, Matthew, who cares?
But not your boy toy.
So when you're looking at the depth and especially with Dubas, I think you really want to make sure that you have that depth down the middle because, I mean, Sean makes a really good point about their defense. They really do need a solidify their top four. So I could see either or going to Pittsburgh and that being a destination for either Lindholm or Hanifin.
And if you're willing to do an interdivision trade, I think for any of the pieces the Flames have available, if you're willing to go interdivision, LA could be a serious contender for any of those guys.
Yep.
Is that if they don't get Dubois?
Fair.
Yeah.
Oh, I'd rather take Lindholm over Dubois. If Lindholm's
And
available, I'm
you know,
gonna-
if we're talking interdivision, I think a great landing place for Hanifin would be Seattle.
Well, what is Seattle giving up though?
I think Seattle would
Well,
have to start with some.
why would Seattle want Hanifin? What is this with Hanifin in Seattle? I don't see it.
You don't see it?
No.
How
I
about
think
your
that-
shirt? What does your shirt say, sir?
Seattle, I don't see it as a match. Like, I mean,
think-
you're not giving up Riker Evans.
I think if Seattle was going to go at it, they would need to offer up forwards in that case and draft picks.
They need scoring. They to me, Lindholm would be more of a person that I would be going after if I'm Seattle and Hanifin.
So for the forwards, you're not giving it Jarrett McCann, your 40-goal scorer, Yanni Gord. Okay,
I would love Yanni Gord on the Flames.
I mean, he's 31. Surprisingly enough,
I don't care.
But if you're trading Lindholm, you're going futures. You're not looking at.
Well, that's it. I'm not
I
looking
disagree.
at roster guys.
I disagree.
I think it depends where they want to be, Devin. Is it a futures deal? Is it not? We talked about this before you came off. Do you try to make a deal, make one more run?
As of right now, what Craig Conroy has talked about is let's make it work for now, because we were very close. If Markstrom was at league average, they
But
would
he
have
talked about that before. Three
right?
top guys asked to potentially leave.
Yeah,
it's
the
very
issue,
true.
right?
It's very true. Like, okay, if Lindholm stays, then you go for it. Pretty much, this is what I'm reading from the Flames brass, is that if Lindholm stays, they're going for it. But if Lindholm goes, then it's fucking fire sale. Throw your hands up in the air and hope for the fucking best, because who's going to be your number one center? Who's going to be on your back end, solidifying this number or this top four defense? And you're losing your third line center, your heartbeat of your team of last year of Backlund, and you have Toffoli not wanting out, but he is potentially going to be on his way out as well. They're entertaining offers, so it's one of those ones where it's like, throw your hands up in the air and say fuck it.
Well, that's why, like, if we're talking a Lindholm trade, you're going full rebuild at this point.
But we're not. It doesn't mean that once that trade happens, then yes, absolutely, you go full fire sale. And I know that you've talked about this is where
I think any one of these trades in isolation, you could say let's go for it. But moving all these guys, I think that if they got to move them all, I don't think you can go for it.
Well, it depends on where Zari's
I would
at
say
as
if you're
well.
moving Lindholm, who's your number one center?
But that's the thing, man. That's what I'm talking about. Is that if Lindholm goes, then yes, you're throwing your hands up and you're doing a full rebuild.
Throw your hands up in the air. Do the scorch.
Exactly.
and that Lindholm trade has to be one that starts it all. So like,
but it doesn't sound like that's potentially an option, right? It doesn't sound like that. It sounds like Conroy is waiting for an answer. And if he doesn't get an answer before the draft, then it's like, okay, well, unless somebody blows me out of the fucking park with this trade, I'm not trading him.
What I'm trying to say, Dev, is that if we're looking into potential spots for Lindholm and trades for Lindholm, if you're entertaining that, unless you're going to basically, and you're going to hate this because you hate this player. Unless you're going to Washington and you're getting a Kuznetsov back.
Why? Like that's ridiculous. That's absolutely
ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
Unless you're finding a way to do something like that, you're looking at futures, and that's what's kickstarting the rebuild.
I know that's exactly what I'm saying, man. Is that like it's about the timeline of it all, right?
Yeah.
Is that if you don't get a full 100% I need out from Lindholm before the draft, then he will be a Calgary Flame until the draft. Or sorry, until the trade deadline.
Yeah, but Dev, we talked about this before you got on. What the Flames cannot be in another Gaudreau situation. So say they're in.
It's not another Gaudreau situation, man. He doesn't have a no trade fucking going into this season.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Just let me finish. Let me finish. They can't be in another one where they're like, if they're at the deadline and they are in the hunt for a playoff spot. Say they're in a wild card spot, like looking for a non-wild card spot, like in the division, finishing second or third. Are they trading Lindholm?
Absolutely, they are. Yes, absolutely, they are, because you will get a massive ransom for him.
Even if they're in the hunt and they
Yes.
feel like they're
Absolutely.
You say that, Devin, but ownership's going to be saying that we're not going to get that sweet playoff money.
Yeah.
Where I'll stand with Devin, though, is I think the one thing that people forget with the Gaudreau situation is the Flames were in first place. They were potentially, that was, if I remember correctly, they just had that huge win over Colorado. Everything was going really well. Like it would have been impossible. Like all of the things with Gaudreau at that particular point in time were pointing to him staying. And everything was on like you were going on a cup run.
I'm not saying you should do it, but if you're going to go ahead, Kevin, sorry.
But if you're in a wild card spot, are you convinced that you're like, I mean, I guess it depends. I mean, we saw Florida go do this from the A spot, but that's not necessarily that you're a playoff contender if you're in a wild card spot.
I think if you have to convince fans on this, it's going to be easier to convince them now than say, well, we're in a wild card spot. We sold our best assets. Hope for the best. See you guys.
That's true. I don't know if I agree with you. I think if the Flames
I completely agree with that. I think that's a much harder sell than right now. And
it is definitely a harder
sell to ownership than right now.
But you already had, even before this fucking year of losing Gaudreau and Tkachuk, we had the expansion draft, and we could have sold Gio at the fucking highest price you could have, right? That's when he won. That's when he won the Norris.
I think you can only look back so many times.
No, that's what I'm saying. The year before.
Yeah.
But he was also signed long term. He was also signed at that point, right? And that's all I'm saying is I think if you're looking at this, I don't like I think Conroy needs to be patient, but I also think he needs to be looking at this draft and as an opportunity and set a sort of a deadline for Lindholm where if he's not fully in, then he's entertaining offers. And if someone gives him a decent enough offer, he's taking it.
There's a break point within that. I completely agree with you, Sean. But what I'm saying is that if it's not good enough, you're still going to get a decent ransom at the fucking you have to have a break point within this plan of, okay, yeah, we'll run it back. What if it doesn't make sense? What if it doesn't work? Then what the fuck are you going to do? You're going to let Hanifin, you're going to let Lindholm and Toffoli and Backlund fucking walk 4 guys within the last 2 years of having Gaudreau and Tkachuk won out? No, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. And if that happens, that's a massive fuck you to Murray Edwards and the ownership group for not letting that happen.
What I'm trying to say, Dev, is like at that point, at the deadline, is Murray Edwards and the ownership group saying, let's go for it, see if we can pull a Florida and say, no, I don't want you to trade these players.
And that's my point, is that it's a fuck you as far as the fans go to Murray Edwards and the ownership, because this has happened 2 years in a row, if not 3, if they let those guys go.
Which is why I think you have to make the decisions at least before camp.
And Devin, that comes to a bigger issue is why do these guys get out? What do we need to change here?
Can I say something?
Sure.
There have been times when patience did pay off. I might remind you and point to the Colorado Avalanche, who had a situation with Matt Duchene, who
he was signed, Kev. That's the difference. They've got they can't.
But my point is, Sean,
go, the way I look at it,
where I'm back at Sean. Just wait. Let me speak here for a second here. My point is, where I don't know if I fully agree with you is well, we have to get this done at the draft, and if we don't, we're not screwed. This is not the last draft in the history of Earth. Like this is like I still think you have to make the best move that is possible. I mean, you've talked about, we've had this pushback with Patrick Allvin. Patrick Allvin has been patient, and you've praised that. I think that there's an opportunity here. Like, yes, you need to move fairly quickly, but you also don't need to panic.
I think that's a very different scenario, though, Kevin, with one guy like Duchene than 4 top guys you got to get rid of.
For sure.
Yes.
For sure.
And also Duchene was signed for at least 1 or 2 years after that, too.
Guys, the news came in.
that's why
Harvey
he was
also
a-
wants out now. We've got bigger issues.
That's why that patience works out. Here, I think the Flames need to. I'm not saying panic. I'm not saying just do it. I'm saying, but when you look at where Devin talked about this earlier, like the strength of this draft is if you don't if you find out that these players don't, like, if Lindholm decides that he doesn't want to stay, he doesn't want to sign that contract that's available to him, you have to find a way to maximize the return. And when you have everyone in the same city, in the same arena, and you can talk to all these teams, that's usually what, like, face to face is a lot better than over the phone, right? So I think there's an opportunity there. And if they don't, and all of this is if he doesn't sign, and if he's all that, you have to find a way to maximize the return, and you have to find a way to take the opportunity when it's there. I think the draft is at that time.
It is the best point. It is the best point of time to make that trade for sure. There's, as far as I'm concerned, there's 3 points within, or 3 basically deadlines within making this trade if it needs to happen. It's the draft. It's before puck drop in October, and it is the trade deadline. And there's going to be, you have to believe that Craig Conroy has these break points within those 3 opportunities. And if he doesn't get what he wants out of the draft, you're not fucking pulling the trigger. You're not doing it.
And I agree with you, Dev. I just think that it's at what point are you nitpicking, right? I think it's like if you're all that. That's all.
But like, there's 31 other teams that want Lindholm, especially at that fucking price point, and especially at the trade deadline. You got to expect that there's going to be a contending team. Like, okay, if you eat half of his salary, or if you even fucking a quarter of his salary, he's still going to be worth $3 million fucking dollars for a Selke fucking forward. And that to me, that means everything. So if it's not gonna be at the draft, it's gonna be at the trade deadline. And if you can do it anytime in between there, I can guarantee you that Craig Conroy has a break point of being like, this is what I want, this is what I need, as far as like, okay, this is what futures looks like. Okay, this is what players coming back looks like. And if it's not what he wants, he won't do it, because at the end of the day, the trade deadline, you gotta bet that there's going to be a first round pick, a top end prospect, and a fucking draft pick. Period.
I think we're going on a bit of a tangent now.
The only thing I would say before Chris goes, I just want to say I would not be surprised if there is a trade on the table right now for Elias Lindholm. I wouldn't be surprised of that. Chris, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm all for trade speculation, and that is what this time of year is all about. But I'm going to point out we are an hour and 10 minutes into this, and I haven't gotten a chance to talk about OEL yet. Can we talk Canucks soon?
Let's do it. Before we get there, I also have breaking news. Pocket Dogs is leaving the Dome. They don't want back in either.
Certainly. Sorry, Chris. It's an absolute fascinating conversation. Just the one thing, maybe just for me to wrap it up. I think what happens here, I think is going to be a very telltale sign of the next 10 or 20 years. This has the potential to blow up in the Flames' faces or move this franchise forward.
Either way, it's a franchise-making decision. Whatever.
Absolutely. This is a more important offseason than last year was for the Flames. But let's get to the buyout. The OEL.
No pressure, Craig Conroy.
What's that?
No pressure, Craig Conroy.
Well, really, right? Like, it's,
I know you're new to this job and new to being a GM, but no pressure. This is only going to define your franchise for the next 2 decades.
It's almost like on their way out, Daryl and Brad just like burn the place down. They're like, all right, there you go.
Again, all the fire puns. Love it.
Well, speaking of being fired, OEL was fired last Friday. We got the word from Elliot Friedman that Oliver Ekman Larsson was bought out, and that man does not have to work another day in it. Like, that quote, You don't need a job to have a job if you can enjoy whatever you're doing for the rest of your life. Oliver Ekman Larsson is set for life with a $8-year, $20 million buyout, the largest buyout in National Hockey League history. I guess, Chris, were you surprised that this happened?
I wouldn't necessarily say surprised. I feel like any Canuck fan that is actually like who cares about like the day-to-day and the transactions and all that sort of stuff basically could telegraph this as a realistic possibility. They just weren't sure, I guess, if Alvin had the cojones to actually do it. And he definitely alluded to the fact that it's not something that he wanted to do at the end of season presser. But I think there was a decent amount of healthy skepticism as far as like, that's probably just him posturing. He's probably, potentially considering that behind the scenes. And clearly he was, because they pulled the trigger.
Sean, were you surprised?
I was surprised it happened this season. I was kind of expecting if they'd give OEL one more season to try and find at least be a top 3 defenseman. Not even top 4, but top 3. If he could be the sort of the defenseman that you build your second pair around, I think they'd be fine with it. But but I also think that the Bear injury really put them into a situation where, like, okay, we really need to find a way to change this roster a little bit more. Plus, like, I also don't think that they weren't able to figure out how to trade one of the wingers or a Tyler Myers out without giving up significant assets that they weren't willing to do.
Without adding sweeteners?
Yes, without adding Tyler's favorite word, sweeteners. So I think it's, when you look at that, I think in hindsight, I'm not surprised. But when it did happen, I was surprised it happened this year. I was expecting at the earliest next season.
Although I would maybe argue in opposite of that the best time to do it was this season, because as far as maximizing that cap savings.
Yeah, but I also don't.
When you look at how the cap's expected to go up, I think this was the right year to do it.
Yeah, there is that. I also wonder if the information about maybe where Tanner Pearson's at also played into that, because I think he was in one of either his interview with the new
Ringside Reporter,
or was it the presser?
It was the presser.
In the press, he talked about how Tanner Pearson is hoping to be ready. So I think they needed to make sure that they had the cap flexibility to make moves this offseason to change this roster, because it wasn't. I know they know it's not good enough. Even if you get bounce back years from a couple players and you get some development years from other players, I know they don't think it's good enough, and I know they need to make changes on the blue line specifically. They've got Philip Hronek coming back. I think they're probably wanting a little more of a stay-at-home defenseman or a defensive defenseman for him, as well as finding a partner for Quinn Hughes as well. So, let alone filling out the bottom of the roster. Whether do they think that they've got the right players there? Whether it's a Kyle Burrows, Guillaume Brisebois,
Christian
Wolanin. They've got Philip Johansson, who came over from Sweden at the end of last season. They've got Noah Juleson, Akito Hiroshi, as well as Cole McWard, who played both of those last two played sometime at the end of the year, as well as Jet Wu, that I think might be ready to take that step and push for some ice time next year. But they also need to fill the top end of that of the blue line, so that they aren't relying on those younger players too much. And they also have got that third line center hole that they need to fill. So, like I said, I think hindsight, it made a lot of sense. I thought they would try one more year with OEL.
Being the outsider here and not the Canucks guy, the thing that surprised me is, I mean, you now have a cap hit until till 30-31. I have to imagine you could have found a way to eat some cap on a deal, eat some salary on a deal, move somebody and get a shorter term cap hit. Because I think this is really going to hamstring them having, a $2.5 million cap hit for, as long as they have.
But here's the thing. You're not a Canucks fan, so you don't know that we always want some form of dead cap. We finished paying off Luongo. Now we got OEL, baby.
There's enough dead cap around the league. You probably could have acquired for a lot cheaper, Chris.
I know.
Pull the Phoenix move.
Yeah, because his 2.1 on the cap for the 4 years after his contract would have ended. So, and that's starting in 27, 28. We don't know what the cap's going to look like at that point. Does it go up enough where that's pretty minimal? That's what I'm hoping for. But even to get there, you've got almost $5 million against the cap in 25, 26, 26, 27. That's a good player on your roster. And I think if Vancouver's trying to build a contender, having a $5 million hole in the year that I think they're going to be about at that spot they contend is really going to hamstring them. Yeah, it definitely isn't the most ideal situation for sure. I'm not happy with it. But it's at this point, I can understand why they did it.
I understand why they did too. Yeah, it just makes
the short-term relief was more, at least more necessary in the current moment than the
long-term pain. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was looking for.
We'll deal with it down the road, or it'll be the next guy's problem at that point.
I think what this also says in terms of Alvin and Rutherford is that they trust their pro scouts, that they can find more players like Phil DiGiuseppe, as well as like others that can step up and be cheaper options at the bottom end of the roster.
To me, this smells like that Alvin is not thinking that he's going to be there at that point.
I think you're right, Devin. I think it's kind of, let's do this. Let's get through now, and it'll be the next guy's problem.
I mean, maybe. I look at this, and I think there's also pressure from above. Trying to
Aquilini putting his thumb down? No. Are you sure?
I mean, again, I have to think too, before you bought him out, you even tried to shop him at a 50% discount, because again, even that would be better. And if you had no takers for that, I think it says something about this player, or the league's value of this player.
Moving expensive players is very expensive right now.
It is.
I think the Alvin and Rutherford know that they need to start like building up assets as opposed to depleting themselves, unless they're actually going after top end players. So I think that's part of it. There is like they were not willing to move the assets, to move off of whether it's a Brock Besser, a Connor Garland, a Tyler Myers, to find a way to create that cap space. That
it's true, because even at half he's about 4.2, and that's still expensive for him.
Yeah,
that with the cap situation and everything, that all the other GMs were basically putting Alvin over a barrel in terms of trade proposals, as far as we'll help you out, but it's going to cost you Podkolzin and Höglander to make that happen.
For the Canucks fans here, do you think that this deal becomes a cautionary enough tale that it's going to affect how they deal with Pettersson or Besser or other longer term contracts that are coming up in the next couple of years?
Pettersson, no. But I think yes, and signing anyone in their late 20s, they're going to be they have to be make sure that they're very sure that player is going to age well.
And especially OEL wasn't signed by the Canucks. OEL was signed by the Coyotes. right?
Yeah,
so
That's true.
He was, but they did acquire him, right? They did.
They paid a
lot
high
of
price
a
for
lot
that
of-
deal.
Yeah.
and
Thanks,
I
Jim.
think I would argue Benning acquired them.
Yes. So it's. I think that, but I do think that they will take that with they will look at that and go, okay, what can we learn from that for sure?
I wasn't surprised that the buyout happened. I think Jim Rutherford was talking about buyouts. I was surprised at the length of the buyout. It does feel really long. But I think you're right, Sean. When the Ethan Bear injury was announced, and you're kind of in a situation where you have to revamp that. Like, it is, if you are going to compete in the playoffs, you have to improve that defense. There's no question. And you have to, the Achilles heel of the Vancouver Canucks for the last 2-3 seasons has been that penalty kill, which has been, to quote Devin, fucking brutal. It has been amateur hour at best in terms of penalty kill. It's just not been good enough. So you got to find some other defensemen they have a bunch of people there that play the position of defense. Do they have a quality top six? No. The problem and the challenge is going to be the free agent class. I see.
You're gonna have to trade your way into a top D man if that's what you need.
Yep, for sure.
What's that?
You're gonna have to trade your way into a top D man if that's what you need this summer.
Because
Free agent signing is the third line center, but trade is absolutely going to be how they
I
fill
think
that.
short term they're probably looking at sort of those borderline sort of quote unquote top four defensemen.
I agree. And I don't think they need to fill a top four right now.
I think they'll be looking at defensemen who can sort of just pair well with Roddick and Hughes more than actually be true top four defensemen.
So like a Luke Shen sort of chemistry is what we're talking here?
Yes.
That's at best.
Kevin, when you were saying that, the Canucks didn't sign Ekman Larsson, they acquired him. That's true. But if you look at what they gave up for him, I mean, you gave up a hell of a package to walk away from that player less than 2 years later.
I'm okay. Can I hold on here? This was a terrible trade on the Canucks' part, but I can't sit here and say that Arizona. I'm not going to applaud Arizona winning this trade. I want to wait and see until what Dylan Guenther turns out to be. They gave up people that they weren't going to Louis Eriksson was not a great player at the time. Jay Beagle was not a great player at the time. They were trying to clear cap space. It was a terrible trade. Please don't get me wrong.
Effect though, because we didn't make the playoffs that season, and we would have gotten rid of all three of those contracts at the end of that season.
The reason that this trade didn't turn out is I think Connor Garland did not turn out to the player that I thought he would be. Because I think
second line winger.
Yeah, I think Connor Garland is I think he could get to 20-25 goals. I always liked Connor Garland, and he has.
And if $5 million is overpaid, but if you got to move him and you eat half, I think there's a lot of teams that might look at him for 2.5.
Yeah, but that's what made that trade so bad is Connor Garland hasn't produced at that level. But
I think both guys didn't produce the way they should have.
Yeah, OEL was half decent in his first season when he was paired with Myers, but he was garbage last season.
It was pig crap for pig crap, really. Ultimately, with Dylan Guenther added.
I'm sure Louis Eriksson, Jay Beagle, and Antoine Russell are glad you're calling them pig crap.
Guenther's makes hay on the power play. Can he do it at the NHL level is a big question for me. But it was also the 9th overall pick, right? So it's when you look at that, it's the opportunity cost there. Bad trade. And then it's costing the Canucks for years on the cap. But that's the past.
And I think the Canucks are in a place in their rebuild right now where they can afford to do something like this. They can afford to experiment on the blue line a little bit.
Okay, so you're experimenting with Luke Shen potentially coming back, Travis Hamonic, okay, Ratko Gudas, Ian Cole, Nick Holden, Card Susi, which actually I think would be a good fit. Outside of that,
He's going to get overpaid. Carson
I'm-
Soucy's is going to be a guy someone's going to pay too much money for him.
well, that's the whole thing, though, is that I think he is probably the one defenseman that could probably complement either of what one of the top two defensemen.
I think they're going
within
to
the-
experiment by pulling some guys off from Abbotsford and see what they've got.
But
They've got
man.
they've got Noah Jolson, who has played at the end of the season, was playing a little bit with Quinn Hughes and looked okay. There's been rumblings that they are interested in the Carson Soucy. If they can get Luke Shed back, I think they will. It's not perfect at all, but when you look at what's available, and as long as you're not significantly overpaying, and not necessarily on cap but on term.
Yeah. I think their best bet is to move a forward for a defenseman, then sign a new forward in the UFA class.
That's the big thing for Alvin this offseason, is if he's able to move one of those wingers, and now with the cap space that they have, it doesn't have to be a Besser, Beauvillier, or a Garland. It could be a Höglander or a Podkolzin, and get a defenseman who can fill it, who can be a legit top four for them. That's going to be huge.
First of all, are those two good enough to pull that off? And second of all, what are the Canucks fans expecting for next year? What are they looking for? Are they looking forward to get into the playoffs? Are they looking to be like, okay, well, hey, we weren't the worst, but we weren't, good enough to get in, right?
We haven't been in the playoffs long enough that I think most of the fan base would just be happy to make it to the first round and get spanked in the first round.
I think if this team shows progress and doesn't just like absolutely shit the bed in the first half of the season for the third or fourth year in a row, and you see the management is making smart moves, I think they'd be happy. If they can make the playoffs and they're still building smartly, they'd be happy. If they just missed the playoffs but they're still building smartly, I think they'd be happy.
So what would your trade look like for a Garland or a Podkolzin or a Beauvillier to get a top two line defenseman or top pairing defenseman?
I honestly haven't really thought about that, but I just think is that when I think about what if Alvin's going to make hay this offseason, that's what he needs to be looking at. He needs to be looking at acquiring another top four defenseman. They've got a glutton of forwards. They've got Höglander and Podkolzin who are young enough. They've got the pedigree. I think they still have the ability to outgrow their growth, outproduce the growing pains that they've had so far. And they still have the I think you can still sell teams on potential. I don't see.
Do you think they could go after Hanifin?
No,
that's not.
I think
the
that
CCP morning show was salivating at that for almost the entire morning show earlier this week. So
I don't think they would have the assets the Flames want in return.
Yeah, I don't think it's a fit either way.
In division trades, especially where the Flames are at and where the Canucks are at, would be very, very tough.
It would only work again if the Flames say we're blowing this up and we don't care, if Vancouver benefits.
Yeah.
Although I never thought Calgary and Edmonton would make trades, and there was like a couple seasons in a row where they actually had trades between each other. So anything's possible.
And that James Neal for Milan Lucic trade worked out well for both teams.
So Chris, there was a trade there, but then there was also a bunch of free agents going back and forth.
Fair. And was Chris Russell a trade or was that a signing?
That was a signing.
That was a signing. I remember talking to Talbot. I said, "What? You guys finally escaped and just ran south till you saw the saddle, and we put a red shirt on you, and it's your salvation."
Well, and in all honesty, it was just the Ladislav Schmid trade. I don't know who came back or who went up to Edmonton after that. I forget what that trade was. But
Brossoit was one of the.
Oh, Brossoit? Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I would say that Calgary did win the Neal Lucic trade by far.
I was just making a joke. I wasn't actually trying to.
He was not the real deal at Edmonton.
It was not the real deal in Calgary either.
No.
he was the big deal.
So that deal was Laddie Smeed and Oliver Waugh for Roman Horak and Laurent Passois.
Horak, that's right. Oh my God.
First time those two teams ever made a trade, November 8th, 2013.
But yeah, all I was saying is anything is possible. Yes, interdivisional trading is rare at best, but who knows?
You know what's funny, Dan, is that I was trying to type in Ladislav Schmid and nothing came up. My spelling is absolutely ferocious. It's so bad.
Don't worry, we still love you.
Oh, good.
See, what you have to do is use NHLTradeTracker.com. You don't need to type. You just got to find them in the list of all guys with an S last name.
It's a shame he doesn't have a brother. You could have just typed his name in.
You might have a brother.
Is he playing in the NHL?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't like. Yeah, so I think it is going to be an interesting offseason in Vancouver. I mean, they've got this cap space. They've got some things to do. They've got some people possibly coming back. Tanner Pearson, Ilya Mikheyev, they're expecting to start skating in August. So, and there will be, I think, the one other thing that wasn't talked about much was to mention that the Sedins will be more involved in the coaching side of the Canucks. It looks like they will be more involved in the power play. So we're going to see a little bit more.
Are they both officially assistant coaches?
No.
Will they both be
both have the same title as Iginla, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, but even if you take Iggy out, who's special assistant to the GM, Daryl Sutter used to be coaching advisor in Anaheim, so that's a more appropriate title for the Sedins potentially.
Are the Sedins going to be the first co-head coaches in the NHL?
I hope so.
That'd be so cool.
I want one of them in the NHL and one of them in the AHL. And then when you fire one, you just bring the other one up.
Yeah, we're switching around.
Sorry, we're going to demote you there, Henrik. Daniel, get up here.
That's right. Just every season they rotate.
Kind of like what Calgary did with the Lewises.
That's right. The Richies.
Or sorry, Richies. Yeah.
Yeah, the Knicks and the Brats. Yeah. Let's just we'll quickly touch on the final thing here. The other, there's a lot of other big news to get to, but let's talk quickly about the Hall of Fame. Mike Verdon, Calgary Flame, did get in. Tom Barrasso got in. Pierre Turgeon got in. Henry Lundqvist, which was no surprise. Carolyn Ouellette, I don't think was a surprise. Pierre Lacroix, Ken Hitchcock in the builder category. Congratulations to all of them, particularly happy for the late Pierre Lacroix getting in. I think that was good that happened. But unfortunately, there was two problems with the Hall of Fame. I think that people were bothered by. The first is feels like a number of people were missed again, including former Canuck, former Leaf Alex McGillney. And again, I think there was a number of other snubs as well, and several actually. And I don't know about you guys, but it just feels to me that this is it's an outdated, too quiet stonecutter from the Simpsons process where we don't know how exactly this happens, but I don't recall anyone even having a chat of Barrasso, Turgeon, and Vernon for the Hall of Fame, not for a long time anyway. And so I was surprised to hear those three names come into the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to sit here and say that they are or not Hall of Famers. At this point, I will. Feel free.
Turgeon
is the selection committee.
Barrasso and Vernon, I think you can make a very solid case that they I mean, it depends on what you want the Hall of Fame to be. Is it a small hall, big hall? But when you're passing up players like McGillney, it's very hard to understand.
The rumor on the McGillney thing, though, is that he wouldn't come for the induction ceremony.
That doesn't matter, though, Dan. If he's worthy
Exactly.
to be in the Hall of Fame, then he should be in the Hall of Fame.
I don't disagree, but I think it's the same reason the Flames haven't retired Kiprusoff's jersey, because he won't be there. Like, I think that's one thing these guys are looking at, is having that player there.
Well, would Theo Fleury be there as well?
In the Hall of Fame?
No, just at the induction ceremony. I know there's a
Well, I
lot
don't
more
think-
going on with that, but
I think that's a different story, but I think he won't be there for different reasons. But the other thing I think this year is we haven't had a lot of goalies recently. I think this year might sort of be a makeup year for goaltenders. It's the ref's makeup call in the third period, because
but then why is Cujo not in?
that is a good question. I think Cujo should go in over Barrasso.
He should be in over both, in my opinion.
I would agree. His Cujo's numbers are better than both, even though he didn't win a Stanley Cup.
And I think that's probably why Vernon's in there, because he's got the cup.
2.
which is an outdated barometer, in my opinion.
I agree, but the Stonecutters are a very outdated group.
Do you know how old Lanny McDonald is?
We do.
Love him. Love him to death.
That's Lanny there with the hat.
Yeah. I mean, no matter what, I feel like there's going to be a lot of people who are upset because of X, Y, and Z. It's very it is political to a certain extent, and which really sucks. But it is what it is, and I feel like realistically, within the next 3 to 4 days, people will not give a shit about it, and then all of a sudden, within 360 days, they'll care again. Right.
And this is true of every sports Hall of Fame. There's always these controversies. And I really think at some point, I would say in the next 5 years, I think that we will see one of the major sports leagues, I don't know if it'll be the NHL, really go with a fan voting component for their Hall of Fame.
It will not be the NHL.
It won't be, no.
Because they are the conservatives.
The NHL will be the last ones to do it, but I could see the NBA doing it first. I think there will be one of the leagues that will have almost like the 6th seed in the votes as being the fan votes.
I would love it so that John Scott could get.
I would vote in John Scott.
But that's it. You would need to have some metrics.
I was going to say Rory Fitzpatrick.
you would need to have some metrics put in there to make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I'm going to call it now, just based off the inspiration from Dan. It'll be LeBron's first year of eligibility, and he'll win the vote in a landslide, even though he doesn't need it.
Yeah.
But I also think the two other things here with the Hall of Fame is I think a lot of people were upset because it was since 2010 the committee has been allowed to put in 2 women. They've only put in 1. There is a number of stubs on the female side as well, including Fran Ryder, who, of course, was one of the instrumental people to get women's hockey off the ground. She is not in the Hall of Fame. Jennifer Botterill not in the Hall of Fame. There's a number of women still left out as well. And I think that is an unfortunate situation, especially in the builders category. I do think that they should at least be adding 1 woman in the builders category going forward, because they have contributed to the game. And that is another part that I think is outdated in my opinion.
Chris,
and I know
we're
that
talking about fan votes. This would be the first fan vote into the Hall of Fame.
Yes, Tsushimoto.
Yeah.
If you don't
Kevin,
know the story,
Kevin, go ahead, John.
Please, if you don't know the story, I won't do it justice by saying it. Please look it up. It's one of the best NHL draft stories.
I figured with draft day around the corner is appropriate. Kevin,
Yes.
I know what you're saying about women going in there, but I also don't want to put people in just for the sake of having a woman or an LGBTQ entry or whatever. I think there needs to be a criteria in which you judge everybody. But I do think that in the next couple of years, we'll start to see the Hall of Fame getting more diversity. I think we're going to make sure there's more women. I think we're going to make sure there's LGBT components to this. I think that you're going to see that Hall of Fame, the old white guy committee, being pushed to get some diversity. And I would not be surprised if we had a year where we had maybe 4 women and 1 man.
I hope you're right.
It's going to be a few years away, unfortunately.
I think it will be, Sean, but I think there's going to be more and more cry for that to come.
Yep, I agree. There's going to be demand for it. I just don't know if they'll listen.
You know, and I think right now with, you know, everything that's going on with Hockey Canada and a lot of people looking at a lot of these old establishments, I have to imagine at some point the establishment of the Hockey Hall of Fame committee is going to be under scrutiny as well. And how we
to
do
a point
things.
where the demand for more transparency in the selection process gets so loud that it's unavoidable.
Yeah, or even having some sort of these are the criteria you have to hit to even be eligible. Like right now, It just seems like it's, you know, okay, well, it's almost like when the new Pope's elected. We'll wait for them to come out and the smoke to come out the top, tell us who they've chosen and who they haven't, instead of like, okay, here's our list of 14 eligible people. Let's make sure that, you know, we are picking the best of those.
So
Like,
let's just
let alone
hope that Halford and Bruff put Lanny's feet to the fire when they interview him tomorrow.
They won't, but
let alone the fact that you know, you're going to have some people who probably won't be there anymore as well. You know, as far as the inductors, the people who induct the inductees into
that logic checks out. Yeah.
No, and that's definitely
committee.
true too, Devin. Is we will see a new generation starting to take over there, and that's going to change things.
New generations. That's right.
Yeah. Just a transparent voting process, I think, would be great.
That's
That's
what baseball does really well is having that transparent voting, because it's not just a secretive stonecutters selection committee. It's the writers.
Yeah,
and they have to put their vote to public the way that the writers have to do it for the awards.
Yeah,
in the NHL.
and
But
that's what the NHL would
want
need
that?
to get the fan voting component to say, here's the 14 people that are eligible, not Scott or Tujimoto. Pick one of them.
Do we want that though?
I don't necessarily want the who voted for who, but I want the voted result. Like, I wouldn't mind, like, if there would be a process where these are going to be the 15 finalists we're looking at.
Yeah, I don't even care if I know who votes for who, but what I would kind of like to have is this is the criteria to even qualify. A guy has to meet these minimum criteria, and so that means here's the 14 people that are eligible. Pick 5 of them.
But
just tell us the fucking threshold. God damn it.
What if the players aren't having that threshold that are eligible for that year? Right.
Well, I don't think it has to be the same threshold every year. I think it could change every year as long as we know what this year's threshold is.
But is that fair for the Hockey Hall of Fame? This isn't the hockey of, you know, pretty good.
No, but I think that when we look ahead, though, Devin, we're going to have years like the lockout year, the bubble year, where we're going to have to change those numbers anyways for a couple of years. So I think that there could be different things you're looking at.
Well, whose fucking fault is that?
That's a different podcast.
Exactly.
All right.
Right, but I think you could change those. You might say, hey, we want more goalies. Let's put in more goalie criteria, or we want more, you know, outside of the NHL guys, because it's not the NHL Hall of Fame, right? It's the Hockey Hall of Fame. So maybe one year we put in more criteria for, you know, what you've done outside the NHL.
See, I think that that bodes it for more criticism, more bullshit, but that's just one man's opinion.
Well, yeah, but it's also like at least you're holding them accountable, as opposed to right now where it's just like, what the fuck? Like,
well,
we have no way to sort of say, why isn't this person?
Yeah,
why isn't that?
And I think if you do that too, you also have to get rid of the years of criteria. You can just say, here's a whole pool of guys. This year we're going to look for this, but that's okay because this guy's still eligible next year.
But what about the players that, or the builders who meet the criteria the year before, but all of a sudden you have a massive fucking flood of Sidney Crosby, of Evgeny Malkin type of people, right?
But if you get rid of the criteria years, though, does it matter when you get in as long as you get in?
Depending on how big the draft class is, or how big the induction class is, right? So that's where it kind of stipulates. And I'm kind of more on the side of you guys, but I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, and I think you could even play fast and loose with how many people you let in those years too. Then
12 people. Let's go.
The whole first round of 2003.
Yeah, exactly.
Except when you redraft 2003, in the top 6, you've got 3 players from outside the first round, including one from way down there in Pavelski.
Yeah. Sean and I had this debate. We'll end with this. Is Joe Pavelski in the Hockey Hall of Fame?
Chris?
If I had to pick a side, yes.
Devin?
Dan? I want Dan to go
Nice
first.
politics, Devin.
Yes, of course.
I don't think so. I think it depends on what criteria we're going for. He's got that Iron Man streak, but I think that's the big thing that would put him in there. I wouldn't put him in the NHL or the Hockey Hall of Fame.
I would say no, just on the fact that there's probably going to be a majority of players that are going to have better criteria than him. And this is where my biggest itch is within this process is that, okay, if we're changing the criteria, then it makes it unfair for Joe Pavelski potentially to get in or not get in.
See, I think he will get in. I just don't think for what I think the Hall of Fame should be. I don't think he doesn't reach my criteria. And I'm not saying that he's had that shouldn't take away from his career, which has been fantastic. I just don't think he's quite reached that. But when you look at some of the players who have gotten it in, I think he will be sort of like, there will be a year where he's the Tom Barrasso or the Mike Vernon type deal.
And
Sean,
it's almost like how the Flames have their forever flame and their retired numbers. You've got those guys that need to be honored, but maybe not in the Hall of Fame. And I think he'll definitely have his number hanging in SAP Center in San Jose, but I don't know if he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Sean hates Joe Pavelski. That's what we come away with this, right? Everybody?
It's better than hating puppies like Kevin. So
Everyone knows I don't hate puppies.
He just strongly dislikes them.
I don't like Harvey the Hounds, okay?
And Harvey doesn't like you either.
Yeah. All right. Let's leave it there. We will be back next week. We're going to recap what happens. It's going to be a very interesting next few days here. We've got, there's a number of teams that I think have got a lot going on here. We didn't touch on what is going to happen in Winnipeg. That's going to be insane. We got a Blake Wheeler buyout coming here very soon, it looks like.
Winnipeg's offseason could be even crazier than Calgary's, and that's saying something.
Yeah. It's going to be something. And there's going to be a lot of team. We've got Brad and Austin having a date in the desert there. So we're going to have that contract coming very soon. There's going to be lots to talk about. So we'll be back next week to discuss it all. Dan, did you guys record a podcast?
We did. We recorded last night. It seems like every time we do a show, there's new news the day after. So I have to think that the Flames are trying to screw us, but we do have a new show. We're previewing the draft, and we're previewing where the Flames might be, or we know where they're picking, but who they might be picking there. We haven't talked a lot about the players coming in or out, but you can listen to us talk about 5 names we think the Flames might take at 16th, and you can find that at firesidechat.ca or wherever you find podcasts.
And how do we follow everyone else?
I am BeardedConnect03 on Twitter.
I'm Matt Schneid's on most social media.
Follow me on Twitter at Gordhouse09. I tweet never.
That's not true. You tweet once every 9 days.
Exactly, yeah.
You can follow me at KEVOLE. Sorry, I had to switch for a different meeting. I forgot something there. I didn't have my handle up, but it's KEVOLE, Shifts and Pucks, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Keep an eye out for our polls, our clips. I'll get back to editing some of these clips here. I was a little slow on that the last couple of weeks. Sorry. Fire the editor of this podcast. And
he's getting traded.
Yeah. I heard he asked for a trade as well. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, subscribe wherever you get your audio. Area 51 Sports Network. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you very soon. Bye for now.